to the Chiss Ascendancy podcast.
All right, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to
Chiss Ascendancy.
You're listening to episode 96, and just like Thrawn and Ezra, we've been gone forever. So we are jumping right in, and we are going to go ahead and hit up Ahsoka. Everybody's excited. Everybody's watching it. As of recording right now, episodes or parts 1 through 3 are out, titled Master and Apprentice, which of course made me think of Qui-Gon, R.I.P. We'll get into that a little bit later. Also made me think of
It's a great
just
novel.
the random lack of medical attention that people get in the Star Wars universe, that apparently just like the medical stuff just changes from time to time. Part 2 is Toil and Trouble, and then part 3 came out most recently, which is Time to Fly. So we're going to do a review of each of these, 5 minutes each. So we're going to keep you guys on a timer. And so if you are new to the channel, there are 5 things that we touch on for each episode. Number 1 is overall thoughts. What do we think of the episode? Number 2, we'll rate it 1 to 10. Number 3, we'll look at a standout moment. Number 4, new characters or standout characters. And then number 5 is what's next. Because we're reviewing 3 things in a row, we'll hit what's next at the very end of part 3, Time to Fly. So we can look forward to that second half of the season. So we've got 8 episodes. We're 3 in. We're going to go ahead and start. Samo, start us off. Part 1, Master and Apprentice. It's we used to not get new Star Wars stuff hardly ever, and now we're getting it in rapid succession. Give me your thoughts on the live action debut of Ahsoka.
Yeah, Master and Apprentice. I watched that a week ago because I watched everything else about an hour ago. So it's a little bit off the dome here, but here we go.
Right.
I liked the idea of a lot of what was going on. I enjoyed that we got about 3 minutes into the first episode before Dave Filoni's greater nature gave up and a Loth Wolf was already made apparent. Loth Cat, obviously a great call out to... Were there Loth Cats in Rebels? I remember them being more...
They're a huge part of Rebels.
Okay. I remember them more dominantly from Fallen Order because there's a Loth Cat.
No, they were...
around.
Yeah, Loth Cat was a huge part of Rebels.
I'll be honest. I'm kind of a fake fan in this regard. I've watched Rebels all the way through once. I've watched Clone Wars like maybe 7 or 8 times, but I've watched Rebels all the way through one time. So recollection's a little fun.
Rebels is one of those shows that it starts off kind of slow, but to me personally, by the end, the best Rebel stuff is better than most of the best Clone Wars stuff. Especially the 4C type stuff.
Strong claims there, sir.
Strong like train, strong like bull. Okay, so overall thoughts. Where do you rank it kind of against some of the other live action debuts like The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi? What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know if it hit as hard as Kenobi or Book of Boba Fett because I think it didn't have to work as hard to establish something. I think everything that was there was already kind of there in bits and pieces, minus the Dark Jedi. And I'm going to call them Dark Jedi as opposed to Sith, mainly based on the apprentice's actual apprentice braid.
Right.
It seems to be... and I think that it's also been argued, and I don't want to get too much of a rabbit hole, but argued that Sith are kind of extinct, or else the work of Luke is moot, right? Something to that effect.
Right.
But yeah, I think that they didn't have to work as hard because most of the characters were already very well established. And even in this timeline, really, that's 6 or 7 years later, it's not a massive gap like we have from Jedi to Force Awakens. But I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed it a lot.
Right. Yeah, you're looking
had the same
basically
caliber of impact.
Right. You're looking basically the same. This runs simultaneously to Mandalorian season 2 is my understanding. So yeah, it's not a million years later. This is about, I want to say 6 or 7 years after Return of the Jedi, if I'm not mistaken. So I thought it was really, really good. I thought as far as live action debuts of a show, Mando season 1 is hard to beat because you have the Grogu reveal and things like that. This is better to me than the first episode of the Book of Boba Fett or the Kenobi show. Both of those, at the end of the first episode, I was like, so that's the first episode? This one really felt strong, came out strong. I loved. I thought they handled Ahsoka really well. I thought that the girl who's playing Sabine was really good, and the intro of the two Darksiders is really, really good. You've got Baylan Skull and Shin. I can't remember her last name. Okay, rate it 1 to 10. 1 being the D Squad, 10 being the Empire Strikes Back. Go for it.
Right on my rating scale. I'm gonna give it a 7.5. I'm gonna give it a 7.5.
I'll give it a 8.5. I thought it was a really, really strong intro. I really enjoyed it. Standout moment for me was 2 things. The intro felt very Indiana Jonesy, so I was jumping right in because I've been on a bit of an indie kick myself with the latest movie having come out recently, that was really fun. And also just to me, the development of Baylan's character is very, very interesting. I feel like he is obviously not a Jedi. He makes that very clear in his introduction, but at the same time, he's not a Sith, being the point that you made earlier on undoing the work of Luke and Anakin in episode 6. And also, they made a huge point going into the sequels about Kylo Ren and Snoke not being Sith. The Sith are gone. Right. So we know that, but he's definitely more noble than you would think. Right. So those were a couple of stand-up moments for me. What about you?
I definitely was intrigued by the Baylan character. And I think you and I talked about this a little bit last week, but he feels to me like a call out to Joris Sabayoth, which if you haven't read the Heir to the Empire trilogy, was basically one of the contingency plans for Palpatine to restore power to the dark side.
Right.
And the Joris Sabayoth, the original, was in Outbound Flight, which kind of becomes relevant again.
We'll get into that.
And then
it's hard to not just jump the whole way in.
Well, especially when I get on this tangent, because it seems like there are a lot of call outs to the original Heir to the Empire trilogy and some little nuggets from other Thrawn texts like Hand of Thrawn, Outbound Flight, or the more recent Thrawn trilogies. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think that establishment of those characters, I'm always going to be more fascinated by the really cool dark side characters than I am by the admittedly, and I don't mean me, admittedly by the show mediocre light side characters. It's fun to see Ren without the rebels plot armor where the good guy wins in about 25 minutes, where she just keeps screwing the pooch over and over again. I feel very vindicated.
You were going through Rebels, you were specifically frustrated that nobody was dying. I remember that.
Well, I just
and you were like, they're dead to rights. Yeah. What's going on? It feels like, and you said it weakened the story.
Yeah. I feel like it's like Scooby-Doo meets Supernatural meets Dragon Ball Z. Like the characters just can't get killed. So it's nice to see a little bit of realism added to these characters. It's weird seeing Ahsoka so stoic. I don't think I saw and I guess you see her a little bit like that when she's under her, pseudonym all throughout Rebels. But I think we get to see a little bit of Ahsoka's what I would call true character, or her natural state in episode 3. And I guess we can get into that. But those are kind of my standout points, I think, as far as things that really drew my interest in for episode 1.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm right on board with all those things as well. To me, and before we get into part 2, something that a lot of people that I've spoken with about the show, they say it feels like Star Wars. And I think that's a really good point, is that it really does feel like Star Wars. Sometimes the shows that we've seen recently, they do and don't at times feel like I'm watching Star Wars. And so the intro with not the crawl, but the text was fantastic. I remember I sent you a picture of seeing the words Thrawn on screen, and I was like, is this real life? Because we started this podcast several years ago, not knowing how long we would have it, not knowing what would happen. We're in totally different seasons of life now. We've both moved since then. We've both changed careers. We've both all these crazy things. And so looking all those years back, choosing the Chiss Ascendancy as our name, we were like, And we've even had conversations like, did we do the right name? Like, is this too niche?
And here
But
we
getting
are,
to see
all these years later.
you know, your baby is ugly.
Right. An even deeper cut than the Chiss Ascendancy, the YouTube original series, Chad Vader. All levels.
The old Chad Vader.
2010, maybe. That was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. No, 2007 or something.
We're going to find out.
But yeah, it's very exciting. And we have not seen Thrawn since. We have not seen him so far in the show, which sucks. But I feel like the reveal will be huge. Okay, so we're a little bit over our time. We're trying to keep it short and sweet. We're moving on to part 2. I'll start this one off.
Day shift manager started 2006.
See, so 2006, 7?
Yeah, I really need to get back into
that's a freaking funny show. It's on YouTube if you want to find it, if you're listening. Okay, part 2, Toil and Trouble. So we cut to Sabine is injured, and Qui-Gon's thinking, what the hell? This is like the 20th person that's been stabbed by a lightsaber in the last 10 years that has not been killed.
I've read something a little bit along those lines. So it is, I think it's supposed to have been the headbutt or the getting hit in the face with the lightsaber hilt that did Qui-Gon in more than this. Like, he was already dead before he got stabbed is what I've read. Like, that it was such a serious head injury that okay, I'm sorry, I don't have all my sources bibliographed in my mind. I'm just sharing with you something that I read. It was just an interesting thought that it wasn't necessarily the stab wound that killed him.
Yeah, I'm not.
But then again, if gut shots are the worst, it's a heck of a way to go, is what I've heard.
Yeah,
no, it's just.
I'm not calling you out for not having your source. I'm calling the source out for that. I don't know. I mean,
I seem to remember it having been something that wasn't haphazard. It wasn't like a...
Yeah. I also saw something recently that was like Qui-Gon let it happen because it made Obi-Wan into the Jedi that he knew he could be by giving him the responsibility. I don't know. I guess kind of like a death by Sith, death by cop kind of situation with Qui-Gon.
That's the worst theory than the other one.
Letting himself die?
Yeah, Qui-Gon's not that kind of guy.
I don't know.
He's no quitter.
You must train the boy. No, not quitting, but like...
It's quitting. It's quitting.
Maybe. All right. So 1 to 10, if episode 2 or episode 1 is an 8 or an 8.5, this one's like a 6.5 or 7.
I enjoyed episode 2 more for me. Personally.
You like 2 more than 1?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
I'm gonna give it an...
What was your standout moment?
I'm gonna give it an even 8.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I just enjoyed. I think, if I'm being perfectly honest, I enjoy Hu Yang getting a really dominant role.
Yes, Hu Yang is awesome, and
it's really fun to see him. I mean, talk about like the best built droid in the galaxy. It's like 75% original parts after thousands of years of service. What a guy!
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting because before the show started, we never knew if Sabine was going to be Hera's apprentice or if she was force sensitive or anything. Because for those who only just watched the show and didn't watch Rebels prior, things like that, we had no inclination whatsoever that Sabine was force sensitive. That wasn't something that was on the table. It wasn't hinted at in Rebels. When Kanan is teaching her to wield the Darksaber, it's very, very like standard, basic, floor level stuff. And Hera says, "Oh, does she have the Force?" And Kanan says, "The Force is in all things." And so when you're watching that, you're like, "Yeah, the Force is in all things, Hera. Come on, catch up." But you never thought that meant she's trainable as a Jedi. And then Hu Yang hits her with the robotic factoid of, of all the Jedi that I've ever seen in my entire life, you are the one that is the least talented, which I know made your day.
Yeah, pretty hard-hitting facts. And the way only a droid could deliver it.
Okay, so standout moment to me would be a couple of things. The moment that Hu Yang tells Sabine that she's basically not good enough to be a Jedi in the old days. The thing that was interesting to me that kind of harkened back to the Heir to the Empire Outbound Flight Legends material was that they're getting all these hyperdrives ready to make a journey, and they're going to make a journey from this galaxy, the known galaxy that we've always played in, to the galaxy where they believe not Kanan, Ezra and Thrawn are. And that was a huge moment to me. And I texted you after you had seen the show, and I told you, and that for our listeners, this is kind of a little bit of a niche story. And so you can go and read this book or read the Wikipedia or whatever. Maybe we'll make a video of it. But essentially, the Outbound Flight Project, where Joruus C'baoth during the Clone Wars wanted to take an entire civilization or a colony of people, maybe not civilization, but enough people to create a civilization of people to either the unknown regions or another galaxy, to basically make sure that if everything ended with the destruction of all races known during the Clone War, that the galaxy as we knew it would spread to somewhere else and that civilization could be saved. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of merges on the what's next era of the show already. But I do wonder if eventually that ring will be used to take the Chiss to a safer place in either our galaxy or another galaxy. But we'll break that down a little bit more later. Standout moments for you on this one?
Let me see. Let me refresh myself with my little notes. I think standout moment for me 100% is Merrick, the appearance of Merrick. I thought it was cool to see shipyards. I think anything reminiscent of Corellia is really cool just because, again, it really calls back to novels that are not canon anymore. So you have, Betrayal, and it talks a lot about the shipyards on Corellia.
Yeah, Centerpoint Station, all that kind of stuff.
Centerpoint Station, which also reminds me of the hyperspace ring that's now in Discovery. So there's a lot of things that I feel really draw me back to older texts. But I definitely think Merrick and his kind of appearance, and I don't know, anybody that can, I mean, he ran off eventually, but anybody that can keep up with Ahsoka at this point in their life is definitely something worth watching their career with great interest.
Yeah, I agree.
He's and something that draws my attention in.
Just the look in general, like coming from two guys who grew up like getting every VHS tape in the house into one room so we could build a fort or a castle out of VHS tapes. A medieval knight style looking character is really, really cool. And he has a double blade reminiscent of an Inquisitor, but we don't know if that's the case yet. I was like, oh, is he going to do it? I was watching the first couple episodes with Macy, and I was like, oh, here he goes. Whenever he wound up to do the saber throw, was shout out Star Wars Battlefront 2, the original one, where you could throw your lightsaber and have it come back to you and just like murder people like that. I really thought when he was winding up, I didn't know he was going to throw his saber at Ahsoka. I thought that he was going to do like this and then jump in the air and hold his saber up and let it helicopter him away to the ship.
I'm glad they didn't do that. That's one of my biggest.
So I'm kind of sad that we didn't see that, but
helicopter.
All right, moving on to part 3 here. Just came out here recently. This one's called Time to Fly. This is definitely setting up more story. You spend some time with Hera talking to the New Republic senators and the Mothma herself, Mon Mothma, and talking about this threat. Yeah, and the politics, all that kind of stuff, which is some of the best and worst parts of Star Wars as far as taking you away from the action, but showing you, like, obviously part of George's whole thing is to tell a story or point out the good and bad of real life through storytelling, which several years ago, we all kind of knew, like, not everything's as it seems, but then in the last several years, you're like, things are really not at all what they seem. Yeah. And so getting back into the politics of Star Wars, what did you think of this episode? Did you enjoy it? Did you feel like we could have fit more into an episode of a show that's only supposed to be 8 parts so far?
I enjoyed a lot of this episode. It felt really short. One of my really good friends called me just before we got on here because he wanted to chit chat about it. and we both agreed that I don't know that it's necessarily short in the grand scheme of Star Wars shows episodes, but it definitely felt short because there was so much being packed into it. We had a lot of revelations about Sabine, and the way that she has her relationship with the Force again reminds me of something from an Old Republic novel. Of you remember Theron Shan?
Okay.
He's Satil Shan's bastard kid, and he has kind of an awareness of the Force that makes him powerful as like a hired gun, but he doesn't have an affinity for the Force in a way that it would make him really a Jedi.
Is that from the book Annihilation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
He's a cool
I
character.
recall.
That's not one of the most standout Old Republic novels. Yeah, he's got the
chip on the side of his head.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's a good book. Yeah. I remember I was working at a camp in Kerrville, Texas, and we went to that store called Hastings, and
of course.
It's like a $30 book, right? It's a new hardcover novel, and there's no price tag on it. And the lady was like, "How much is this?" And I was like, "I don't know, $10." And she was like, "Okay." And it was a joke, because obviously she's going to ring it up. It's going to be $28 or whatever.
Right.
And then she rings it up. She goes, "It's not pulling up." And she looks at me and she goes, $10. And she charged me $10 for that book. So I remember
really
reading
funny.
it that summer. But yeah, I think it's very, very similar to what you're saying about him, is that like enough of the almost, you know what it is? It's almost like what they used to describe Han Solo as in Legends continuity, because years ago, for those of you who didn't read the comics and the books and stuff, especially before the Disney takeover, the Disney purchase, Han Solo was a level of Force sensitive that they called Force aware.
Yeah.
And Force aware was, because now they're doing this whole, the Force is in everybody and anybody can reach it. And it was kind of weird because the old trilogy was like that, and it was kind of like, well, Luke opens himself up to the Force, so then he's capable, but obviously he's got this family heritage. But It was kind of like maybe everybody has it, and then you get to the prequels, and the midichlorians are a huge deal. So if you don't have midichlorians, then you don't have midichlorians, and you don't have access to the Force like others do. And now they're kind of opening it back up to it being in all things. So
I think it is and it isn't, right? It's like almost pantheism or panentheism, depending on your perspective. That it's like in all things, and it is all things. But at the same time, it's like only certain people are capable of becoming aware of it. It seems like they're really fast and loose with who all has it. But I
think of the way that they're describing it in Ahsoka is almost like wisdom. Like they're people who just have a better head on their shoulders, just to start life. It just seems like they have more patience, more wisdom. They know when to speak, when not to speak. And then some people don't have that, and they go through things in life and they have to gain that wisdom, and some do and some don't. But it definitely seems like the Force now, like Ahsoka said in this episode, there are levels of talent, but it's available to anyone. And but Sabine, hearkening back to what we were talking about Han Solo, it seems like back in the day you had being someone who was Force aware, and so that's what made him quick enough to beat someone like Greedo in a draw, even though the Greedo's species is supposed to be quicker than humans.
Yeah,
but they're not. And in Han's case, because he's Force aware, or that's what made him such a good gambler, or things like that. And so, if this was like Tales from Mos Eisley's Cantina, Sabine Wren would be Force aware, but not Force sensitive.
Right.
If that helps put it in perspective for the Legends fans.
Yeah, that's something that kind of stood out to me. And then obviously you have the senators, and I don't know if the quote I referenced was a little bit too of a deep cut, but Palpatine in the Phantom Menace, when what's his name, the blue cat steps over and starts talking to the Supreme
Masamita.
Chancellor. Yeah, Masamita, F that guy. And Palpatine's like, into the bureaucrats, the true rulers of the Republic. When he's like really trying to undermine all the confidence. That's what made me think of that. I was just like, man, all these guys can like suck it. And I don't know if it's just me, but ever since I read Plagueis and Palpatine like went on that kill streak with all the Grand senators, I was like, man, Grand can just suck it. They can suck it so hard.
Yeah, I saw him, and I was
so I saw that Grand senator, and I was like, who invited this clown?
Who's this witch?
Yeah, that's the kind of energy I had. And that was kind of a standout. It seems like they're always choosing the wrong thing. So at one point or another, you should just stop listening to them, which apparently never happens until there is another war.
Right. And we found out from novels early on in the stuff that was coming out after the Force Awakens, we found out pretty quick that Mon Mothma dismembered the Rebel fleet or any kind of New Republic army like really quickly after the war. I think
like
they talk about that in
decision.
Bloodline. Is it
It
Bloodline?
is in Bloodlines. And I think I was actually just thinking of that novel because of how many senators have just like malintent. When Hera asked him, she's like, "Do you ever fight in the war, or do you just kind of sit out and wait to see which side won?" Pretty hard tax kind of comment there, but it really, I feel like it kind of really summarizes a lot of the senators' roles, where they're like, "Well, we serve now," and be like, "You kind of do. You mostly serve yourself."
It's interesting because how many of these senators, like, they look good on the outside, but they're Orn Free Taa on the inside.
Dude, I was just about to reference Orn Free Taa. That guy's
Bad Batch does such a good job of showing how slimy
physical
that guy
embodiment
is.
of hedonism.
Yeah. It was funny because whenever Hera goes, "Did you serve in the war, or did you sit out the sides waiting, to see who won?" Macy goes, "Oh," like the cat from Puss in Boots. But I thought that it's got to be tough because I think as Hera is legitimately, and Ahsoka as well, they're on the journey to figure out how to stop Thrawn from coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But Sabine is on the journey to try to find Ezra. And so obviously Hera has a tie to Ezra as well. And so they are able to kind of push back on her wanting supplies or needing help or things like that. But I do think that once Thrawn comes back, I think the only thing that can defeat Thrawn, like what Timothy Zahn has said, is something that's unforeseen. And it's like, okay, if he's ready for the eventuality of this, and this, then he's going to have a way to beat it. And now that he knows that Purgil exists, like, there's really nothing else that they can do to defeat him, which kind of goes into our fifth element of every review is what's next. We've kind of held this off to the end to just try to flesh out these first 3 episodes. So 3/8 of the season in, and that I know of, we don't have plans for a second season as of yet. But where do you see this going? Do you have any thoughts, theories? I know a huge theory right now is Merrick the third Darksider? Is that supposed to be a new spelling or a play on words of Galen Merrick, who is Starkiller for the old school Star Wars The Force Unleashed fans? And it is interesting because apparently,
if you look under additional voices,
Sam Witwer is
credits.
The voice. Yeah, Sam Witwer is the voice, and we finally get to hear him. I don't recall him speaking in parts 1 or 2, but in the third one, it's just a very robotic, like, "as you wish," like,
something
very
Sam
dark
Witwer
side,
so
bad guy kind of voice. Right. So do you think that has any base in reality? That could be Starkiller left over from the original trilogy and the Galactic Civil War?
Let's talk about it, because anybody short of Vader or Palpatine is not going to be running the show if an actual Starkiller's on the Force.
Yeah, true.
Let's be real. The amount of power that he had was absolutely absurd. I don't see Balin or I think her last name's Hadi pulling down a Star Destroyer out of the sky. Let's put that as it is. I think it may be a cool reintroduction. I just don't want to get my hopes too high because I foresee a Captain Phasma sort of ordeal. You remember how excited we were about Captain Phasma and how much Captain Phasma merch there was, and then she had
there was a lot of merch, and the girl that
35
plays
seconds
her
of screen time.
Yeah. And Gwendolyn Christie was so cool as Brienne of Tarth in Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones was like riding the wave right when The Force Awakens came out. So we were like, dude, if they're going to go find this chick, Brienne of Tarth, to make her a Star Wars character. Yeah. I agree. I don't want to get my hopes too high. And it kind of reminds me of, we put out a short a while ago about, could Starkiller be canon again? And if he was, you know, if he was, then does it make sense? And would you have to nerf him? And a lot of people were like
You
hating on
absolutely
me
have
in
to
the
nerf him.
comments and being like, just, they would say stuff like, let the legend live in legends. Or they would say, why do you have to nerf him? That's a stupid idea. Why would you even suggest that? And I'm like, because you can't have people coming around just blowing planets apart. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit in the story anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
Especially if
0%
it's
chance he comes
post
in full
episode
power.
6.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it would be one of those things like, if somebody was so powerful, why didn't he make it, to the era of the Force Awakens? If he's gonna be, and he's like third wheel right now, he's just making that dark side trio a trikey. He's not going to be as powerful as
Right.
Starkiller was. It's just there's no dice in
So
that. But I think the
let me
idea of
put
it's really cool. His helmet looks like Sith Stalker armor, a little bit modified, like into
yeah,
like a
very
medieval
old
helmet.
school looking. Yeah. Let me put the question to you then. After all these years, would you rather the Merrick character just be a new dude, is what it is, or would you rather him be somebody important?
Unless he's a main character, I don't see him adding too much depth as him being actually Starkiller Reborn, because that's a main character. That is not
It's
not
too
a
much. Yeah.
side character.
Yeah.
His backstory's too rich, his character's too well developed, I think, in the Legends material. But I think the idea of it has circulated a lot of conversation, which is exciting. And I think that having just somebody that's kind of a cool third, leg to rely on there, if like, I think the actor for Balin died, right? Now we need somebody to kind of fill that role a little bit, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, we don't know what happens to Balin's character, and definitely rest in peace to Ray Stevenson. We don't um, how he passed away is still, I guess, under investigation, or he had some kind of a heart issue, and we don't know what the source of it is and things like that. But if the character is supposed to have lived, and obviously Ray passed away, we don't know what the story is with that. We don't have any kind of an inside scoop there. A couple of ideas, and then we'll try to wrap this up. Okay, two things. Another concept that I heard, that I saw, that I was like, Dave has done a great job of taking things from Legends. And I remember all those years ago, he posted him reading, and it was just the spine of an old heir to the Empire, like the old one. I'll try to find a picture of mine, but the first heir to the Empire was like a yellow book with like a dark blue, almost black spine. It's just heir to the Empire, and he was reading that, and that was right before Rebels season 3 came out, which of course was the time we brought Thrawn back into canon, and people cried, and it was just amazing.
Yeah. It was huge.
Dave has done such a good job of that, and so I wonder if the theory I saw is Merrick, the Luke, Luuke, from Legends, and the reason he has a mask and everything, and the reason he's almost too much in the background for such a strong character, is because he is a clone of Luke Skywalker made from the hand that was cut off at Cloud City. Because we know that
that's a thought.
We know that Palpatine has that hand, because in the Darth Vader comics, I believe Palpatine takes Vader to Exegol, and it's in a jar there. And they don't necessarily say, hey, this is Luke's hand, but there's just a random freaking white guy's hand in a jar there. Seems like a pretty obvious choice. And in Legends, there was a clone of Luke Skywalker named Luke, Luuke, made from that DNA.
Yeah, it's
the
like
same
L
way.
Prime Ook.
Right, exactly. So that's an interesting thought. And then I'll give you one last thought from me, and then if you want to close out with another thought of what you might want to see going forward. I think that the way that we get around Thrawn being a bad guy, I'm fighting against it, because the Thrawn that especially from the new novels, especially from the Thrawn trilogy, especially from the Ascendancy trilogy, is that Thrawn is not evil. He simply wishes to protect the Chiss Ascendancy specifically from the threat of a species or a people known as the Grisks. He defeated them years and years ago before he was exiled and joined the Empire. And knowing that the Grisks were going to come back in force, he decided to join the Empire as it was brand new at the time because they stood the best chance of helping the Chiss World War to break out. So,
Right.
all that to say, the Outbound Flight Project, where they have civilizations of people or whole towns or whole families or whatever on a ship, and they have this giant ring of hyperdrives attached to this cylinder, and they're sending it to the edge of known space. In this case, in Ahsoka, to an entirely different galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
I think the long term will be if Thrawn does end up being the full on big bad, which if he is, then like it is what it is, and I'll embrace it. But I think, to me, maybe at the end of the day, Morgan thinks she's taking that ring to get Thrawn, but I think Thrawn will end up using that same technology to take the Chiss to a new and safer galaxy to save them from the known galaxy, which is always constantly filled with war. And he's going to try to find a new place for them to start, especially since his home planet is not really inhabitable. If you remember from the Thrawn novels and the Chiss and the Ascendancy novels, the whole planet, similar to like what we have with Mandalore, like the planet's surface is uninhabited, but they all live underground, taking them to a whole new place to start life all over again. That's my far-reaching theory.
Interesting. I wonder. Again, I don't want to get my hopes up too high. Because I know how few people have actually read the novels. I don't know if it would be realistic to hope for Dave to pull that much out of literature. But I see the whole story shifting once Thrawn enters the scene, because we see, I don't know, I love Thrawn, and I'm so grateful that Rebels took the weight of making him canon again. I hate that they put training wheels on him, because Thrawn doesn't lose. You know what I mean? He's not that guy.
I think they did a good job of making it like, oh, he lost because this person lost their cool, or he lost because of the Purrgil. They did a good job of making it where he didn't lose of his own accord, in a sense. You know,
right? I think Tim Zahn did a phenomenal job of retconning that in the novels, where the elder of the myth house was like, yeah, he's not going to lose unless there's something unforeseen or something he's never seen before. And I was like, yeah, Tim Zahn did not like that at all. But I don't know. I kind of want to keep my horizons open. I'm cautiously optimistic about how this goes. I know Thrawn's not meant to be the focal point, even though he immediately will be for me. But I also know he's the guy that, like Palpatine, he's seeking power. Anybody in the Empire was seeking power. Thrawn thought of power as like a means to an end. Like he wanted to achieve a goal, and he's like, well, if I need to be the highest rank and most successful officer to achieve that goal, then by all means, let me invent another, higher status.
Right.
But I am curious as to where Morgan's motives fit into it, because I assume, based on the fact that she is backed by Imperial loyalists, that she has designs on revitalizing the Empire. I know Thrawn.
And like, how does she fit into the group of people? It's interesting because she seems so loyal to him, and she's like, he's calling to me, which is weird because Thrawn doesn't have that ability. So I don't even know if that's real.
I assume it's the way that anybody who was in a cult feels like their cult leader is able to communicate with them.
Yeah.
Psychically.
And what do you think about, like, in The Mandalorian season 3, you have all these people who are like, you had the Moff Gideons, you had the what's that guy's name? Captain Pelion, Admiral Pelion, who's also
Such a
awaiting
cool dude.
Thrawn's return. You know, he's a great character from Legends brought back into canon.
Oh, yeah.
What is, like, where does, like you said, where does Morgan fit in that? Because she's an Imperial, but she's a Night Sister first, and is she like,
she
is
seems
her
like
long? is her long-term goal like to personally defeat Thrawn because he's the highest ranking Imperial left and they killed the Night Sisters and like a weird, you know what I mean? Like I can
Yeah,
see that being something that's a thing.
I don't think it'll go that way. Just I don't have really good reason for it. She seems pretty dedicated to the cause, and she also, when she's talking to her hired hands, doesn't really think of herself as a Night Sister.
Hmm.
Based on the way that she kind of she her ancestors were witches, but she's not really, like, it's almost just something that would make her stronger, but it's not her driving
Yeah, she
focus.
seems like she could be force sensitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think any Night Sister is force sensitive to a degree because you have to have a
Yeah,
dark side affinity to be
it's
able to
very
wield dark
interesting. I
magic.
think there's a lot to unpack.
But yeah, so I don't know where her, I don't know what her I don't know what her driving motivation is. I think that's going to be the key to a lot of um, what Thrawn's, and then Thrawn has been. When's the last time Thrawn was left alone with his thoughts for decades? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
he's always
Yeah.
had a goal
I
in
always
mind. So
thought. Yeah, I always thought that whenever Rebels first aired and Thrawn was gone and we didn't know there was an Ahsoka show coming and things, I always said to you, I feel like Thrawn and Ezra would come back from the unknown regions or from wherever they ended up on the same page. They would come back. I just don't see a world where Ezra and what he wants for the galaxy and Thrawn and what he wants for the galaxy, specifically for the Chiss, are really
mhm.
kind of the same thing. I don't really see them being that far apart or different. And so I always felt like they would come back and be like, yeah, so we decided we're actually kind of buds. Like if Callus and Zeb can feel that way overnight, over a
Yeah.
little slumber party, I feel like two people who are like Ezra is far more reasonable and more powerful in the Force than Zeb, and Thrawn is clearly more reasonable and has a bigger, wiser head on his shoulders than Callus. So if those two can see eye to eye, I
Hmm.
feel like Thrawn and Ezra probably could as well to some degree.
Yeah.
Um, Anything that you're wanting to see, not necessarily a prediction, but anything you want to see, if you're writing and they call you and they go, hey, low-key, don't tell anybody, but the last 4 episodes aren't done yet. What do you want to see on screen? What's your call?
I just want to see Thrawn done justice. It's a low ask, I feel like, but I'm again cautiously optimistic. You see him only, and I think part of me is I just want other Star Wars fans to get the Thrawn experience. Like, I
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
remember I was in college and there's this theater out here called the Warren Theater, and it's since been bought out by Regal, and it's not quite what it used to be because they have turned it more into. It's not about the experiential level of it, but it's like it was the Disney World of movie theaters. Like, all the staff wore like little bellhop uniforms with white gloves, and
Oh, that's cool.
it was straight out of what you would imagine experiencing like the 1920s. And we were going to go. You and I had already gone to see The Force Awakens in theaters via the marathon, and so I got back up. It was like the
Mm-hmm.
spring semester, my freshman year, and I was like, "No, it's okay. I've already gone. I don't really have like a ton of expendable cash right now to go." And he's like, "I'll pay for it." He's like, "It's not about the movie, but the Warren's an experience." And like, that was his focus, and I always thought that was really funny. But for me, Thrawn is an experience. He's not a character, and so
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like a lot of Star Wars fans have gotten robbed by molding Thrawn into the Rebels character slot as opposed to like Thrawn, to me, like Starkiller isn't a supporting character, he's a main character. And
Yeah.
so I feel like I would really love to see him not fit the mold of another agenda. I would love to see him thrive as the character that you get in all the novels.
Yeah.
Just not just analytical or clever like you kind of see him in Rebels, but truly brilliant and almost omniscient in his level of ability to predict and to to foresee things and to analyze his enemies and kind of take all those and amalgamize it into a workable, feasible plan that nobody else is seeing or expecting or could. It's just, this is such a brilliant character, and I would hate to see him be brought back again and wasted. So if I
Yeah.
had to ask for one thing, I would like to see him done right.
Yeah.
I
I
feel like
agree.
that's a
I
low bar. I don't
definitely.
have anything like crazy out there. Like, we
Yeah.
already saw Purrgil. Like, what the frick?
Yeah, I would say I want to see that same thing. I want to see Thrawn in his element, and even if he has to be the big bad, like the way that the Avengers unpacked why Thanos was doing what he was doing, and like
Right.
when he killed Gamora, but he was like so weepy over it, but he was like, I have to do this. You kind of felt for him. You're like, is he doing the right thing? Like, and he's not, but there's a moment where you start to question, like, is he the good guy? Like, I want
Right.
to feel, I want to be compelled, because that was the difference when Timothy Zahn wrote Thrawn all those years ago,
Mhm.
back in like 1990 or whatever. He inspired loyalty in his men and in his officers and things like that. And it wasn't fear. It
It was
was
respect. It wasn't
respect.
like,
It was admiration. It was,
mhm.
and they believed, like, if we go into battle, if he's sitting up there in that chair,
Right.
then we're gonna win. And I want
Yeah.
to feel that way. And whether that means he joins forces with the New Republic against a greater force or whatever it takes, I just want to have him done justice. If he does end up passing, I want it to be done right. Now, as far as crazy off the wall stuff, uh, I want to see a Loth Wolf in live action. I would love to see the Bendu in live action, which is an even further reach. I think we're going to see a Loth Wolf eventually, but I would love to
Oh yeah,
see
how
a
are we not?
Nogri. I know.
Dude, that's where
Apparently,
my head was going.
Rook is gone apparently from Rebels, even though he's immortal basically. But to see a Nogri on screen with uh, Thrawn would be freaking sick.
Because that's iconic. That's
Yeah,
iconic
those
Thrawn
two
sidekick
together.
right there. Or,
The
hear me
Salamiri.
out. Yeah. Imagine the only way that Thrawn could exist on a planet with Ezra and like neutralize him, but both of them kind of exist. And Ezra can't reach out to anyone via the
Yeah,
Force. I mean, it's far.
and
It's far. I know
it's
Palpatine would be
far.
stretched, but
I know, but they're in another galaxy that has things that we've never seen or heard of before, and it doesn't have to make sense in the galaxy that we've been in, because it's a whole new universe. It's a whole new
right,
galaxy.
right, right, right.
The rules are different. That would be
So
cool.
that would be very cool. That's my crazy off the wall ask. I feel very reasonable ask is that they do Thrawn justice. My off the wall ask is that we get to see him wearing an Islamari.
Yeah. It would be, what would be freaking sick? If I could have like one thing on just a picture of it, it would be cool if Balin was angry or scared or something and tried to lash out at Thrawn, because the Jeru Sabaoth parallels are there.
Correct.
And if Thrawn had the Islamiri on his shoulders, and they recreated that moment that was in the comics as well, where you see Jeruis like lashing out, and Thrawn's just standing there like this with basically a force field around him because of the animal.
Are
That
we
would be
quite
freaking
finished?
sick. That would be freaking sick.
That would be cool.
So,
Yeah,
well,
that's
that
my
is
crazy
our
ask.
review. That's our review of parts 1 through 3 of the Ahsoka series. Sorry for the wait, Tunchi. We will be back with parts 4 through 8. Hopefully, we'll be able to do them one at a time, if not in chunks. And we will get through this. One last question for you: when do you expect to see the Grand Admiral on screen?
It looked like on the scan that Hu Yang made of the hyperspace ring that it was so very close to completion. However close that is however close we are to seeing Thrawn. Since there's not a rebel fleet to intervene, I would say they'll go relatively unhampered. I think that what's going to happen is we're going to see a little suction cup onto the hyperspace ring, a la Empire Strikes Back, and they're going to get dragged into the other galaxy. I think that's what's going to happen.
And so,
hopefully in an episode or two.
I was going to say, if next week is episode or part 4, I honestly think either the very, very end of 4, if not early on in 5. That's my gut feeling.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. I'll cry if I don't see him till 8.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about it, but I'm not putting it out there into the universe. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This has been episode 96 of the Chiss Ascendancy podcast. Remember, the Force will be with you always.
And more importantly, remember, the only family you have here is me.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.